Let's talk about
politics, environmental science,
global warming,
constitutional rights,
social and economic challenges,
money, power, choice.
Nature does not compromise.
extreme droughts, extreme heat waves.
sea levels are rising, and it is
About climate change.
This is the future of the next.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk About Climate, a podcast where we talk about climate change and how it relates to all of us. Join us, Change the Chamber Fellows, as we talk with scientists, grassroots campaigners, politicians, and more as we open up the conversation on climate. I'm your host, Nora Cross, and we are joined by our special guest, Kyle Rebar.
Hello.
Kyle, how are you?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Kyle, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I live in Santa Monica right now. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I volunteer with Surfrider LA doing water sampling, so testing for fecal indicator bacteria, fun sciencey stuff, community science, I should say. I also do volunteer in a lot of beach cleanups. I've done a long-running trash photography series where I'll take photos of trash that I find in nature. That whole art project led me to start studying sustainability at Santa Monica College. Originally environmental science, but my math skills are atrocious, and I realized that I could do sustainability and take the science classes that don't have the math component, right? That's on my to-do list for the future. Get good at algebra and finish chemistry. Since moving to LA, I moved out here in 2019, and I did the opposite of what most people do, and that I pretty much stopped driving when I moved to LA. I moved to Santa Monica initially because it was like a walkable beach town. Scranton, there's no real public transportation. And when I first came to Santa Monica, maybe in, 2015, 2016 on a work trip, I saw the train downtown, or maybe it was a little bit later than that. I forget the exact year it opened. But the first time I came to Santa Monica, I saw beach, I saw train, I saw people walking around like, oh, this is fantastic, right? And when I first moved out here, I was doing a remote job. So I didn't really need to, drive anywhere. I was doing a lot of editing, that kind of work. And the same thing during the pandemic, I stopped driving because I wasn't going to shows. I really wasn't going anywhere. If I did want to explore, I would just hop on the E-line downtown. And that was, a really telling experience for me. And I guess I'm kind of rambling about this right now, but yeah. So I've had a love of transit pretty much since I moved to Los Angeles, which I know is the opposite, because this is known for being such a big car city. And now you and I both work in a very car-dominated industry.
Yes.
Any film set, you can tell it's a film set because of the blocks and blocks and blocks of giant trucks stacked outside. So that's been an interesting transportation culture to adapt to. I find that I'm often the only person on set that's like, oh, hey, well, you could take the E-line to this set down to the studio downtown, or you could take a bus to this one after hours. Or like for out of town stuff, like, hey, you can take an Amtrak to this gig in San Diego, right? But yeah, definitely enthused for sure. Yeah.
Yes, I think one of the challenges of using public transportation for the kind of job that we do is that we work in different locations every day. So usually, or in my case, I have had to drive to places where I have never been before. And or sometimes where I honestly believe there is no public transportation access, like deserted areas.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. Another one I will say mostly, I don't know, the schedule. Yes, as you said, after hours or working. Yes, and unpredictable times.
Yeah, definitely. I found one thing that I run into is, we do there's a lot of studios in downtown LA, which is a big transit hub for the area, right? But when I am the lead person on a job, I have to collect like the truck that we work out of, which is in a part of town that is not accessible in a reasonable amount of time from Santa Monica. So if I was not a team lead on these situations, I could just take a train straight to the studio.
Mhm.
But and so that's neither here nor there, right? Um, yeah. So what were we talking about?
So, like, it's very interesting because my first question was, how did your interest in public transportation start? But that this is like the perfect answer, like your story coming from one city or one state to another one,
Mm.
finding the difference and your approach to public transportation. Like that tells me a lot about your passion for the topic. So we can go to the second question, that is, what is the climate impact in your opinion of using public transportation, and if you have like any information that you want to share with us.
Yeah. So just according to the EPA, so transportation accounts for about 30% of the US's total emissions. And
Mhm.
that's including like, freight, shipping, large vehicle transportation, and individual transit. But of that 30% of our total emissions, almost 60%, I think the figure's like 57 according to the EPA, is light duty vehicles. So like
Mhm.
your single occupant cars, the rest of that, that's huge. And recently, I made a trip up to the Bay, and I took a flight up, and I wanted to see like, hey, how much carbon does this produce, right? And if you take a flight from Los Angeles to San Francisco, it produces about I think the number is like 280 kilograms of carbon dioxide. On the way back, I took the Amtrak Starlight, and that only produces 8 kilograms of carbon dioxide, which is, just a drastically lower number.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of for transportation, at least in the U.S., we sort of chose the least efficient modes and built our entire primary system around that.
Mhm.
What I do think is important to note, though, when you're talking about public transportation and transit expansion, right? Here in Los Angeles, we're one of the only cities in the U.S. right now that has major transit expansions planned on the books. Like in the next 20 years, we'll have the Sepulveda line. That's going to be
Mhm.
huge when that opens. We're going to extend the K line north. There's looking into a BRT project down Vermont. I've also seen posts floating around about extending the sea line up through Venice. There's the Southeast Gateway extension that's going on right now. And where you look at other cities like San Francisco or New York or Chicago that maybe have slightly more developed transit systems, they're not expanding their systems in the way that we are right now.
Mhm.
So LA has we are in a very exciting time for public transit in Los Angeles. 100 years ago, we had the largest streetcar system in the world.
Mhm.
And we lost it in the 60s because we're gonna rip it out and replace it with the buses. And but look at the situation that got us in right now, right?
Mhm.
But if you're concerned about climate, and if you're concerned about smog, which is a big factor here in LA, one of the best things you can do is look at what kind of trips can you replace driving your car with, to riding a bike, to taking the bus, to walking around your neighborhood. And sometimes it's not practical for everyone to completely get rid of your car, but I think there's a lot of good can be had, and a lot of good progress can be made by just looking at what are some low hanging fruit, some
Mhm.
easy things that I can do to not take my car to these, like to
Mhm.
the grocery store that is maybe a block or two away, right?
Yes.
Um, and that's one thing that is really that I've discovered during the pandemic, right? I ride a little electric skateboard, a one wheel, and I found in the years after the pandemic, there happens to be a grocery store right next to the gym where I work out. So I could make a trip from my apartment up to Santa Monica College to the gym, fill up my backpack with groceries,
Mhm.
go right back down, and I haven't needed to use my car. And so before I figured out that route, my only driving would be back and forth to the grocery store, and I don't have to do that now. And it saves me so much time. It saves me money, and I'm a very bad driver,
Mhm.
and so it saves me and everyone else on the road a lot of terror by me getting that car out, and it helps with traffic too. Uh,
Yes. Well, I also understand that Santa Monica, or I haven't experienced the city a lot. have been near the beach and like the most touristic
Mm,
area. But it is a city very friendly for just bicycles, people walking. And yeah, I think it's a city where you can do it. Well, for example, in LA, it's really hard to commute in like in a different way rather than using your car or maybe the
mm.
bus. Do you think it is feasible, for example, to have in the future this proposal of the cities where you walk around 15 minutes or everything is 15 minutes walking distance from you?
Yeah.
Do you think that's feasible in a place like LA?
I mean, that's the dream, right? So as far as like 15 minutes, I don't know. LA is maybe more of a half hour city just because of how sprawling we are, but I
Mhm,
can't back that up with any actual information.
mhm,
Um, so for in Santa Monica right now, for instance, I would say it's a very bikeable city, and I can get wherever I need to go in Santa Monica, to school at SMC, to the gym, to the grocery store, the beaches that I water sample, the lab where we test everything. I can get around on my bike, on my one wheel. I can walk most. When I first moved out here, there was a gym that was right on Main Street that I could walk to, and
mhm,
so that was like amazing. They since closed down. Thanks, pandemic. Um, but yeah, so it's a very it's a very bikeable city, right?
mhm,
My partner doesn't have depth perception. She's not able to drive,
mhm,
and she's a fitness instructor, so she walks around. Probably like the mile from our apartment to Wilshire and back multiple times a day to the different
mhm,
studios she teaches at,
mhm,
and she gets by, just fine with that. Um, with regards to the city of LA proper, I think this is also, we're in a very exciting time to be in LA.
mhm,
So recently, Measure HLA just passed, and if you're not familiar with that, what Measure HLA does is it legally requires the city to implement projects that it improved in its 2015 mobility plan.
mhm,
So back in 2015, the city put out this proposal that we're going to add pedestrian crossings, we're going to add bus lanes, we're going to add bike lanes. Part of a means of alleviating traffic because that's terrible. A part of eliminating pedestrian deaths because people get pancaked in LA
mhm.
in very high numbers.
Yes.
Um, and also, we have LA has a perfect climate, like
Mhm,
why wouldn't you want to be out on a bike here? If
mhm,
it could be a main mode of transit anywhere, here's the place, right? So, but the city didn't make any action on that plan. They just said, here's what we're going to do. And between 2015 and I think 2022, they implemented less than 1% of the projects
mhm,
was that was in that plan. So what HLA does is it requires the city, like there's now a legal mandate for them to, when they repave a street, um, add bike lanes, add bus lanes, add pedestrian crossings. I believe one of the first major project in HLA just opened up in Hollywood now, so the new bike lane that's up there. And I believe there's another one that just opened up in Reseda as well. So over the next couple of years, we should start seeing more bike lanes, more pedestrian zones, and it should be much much easier and safer to get around the city. And I think that's super super exciting.
mhm,
Another thing we also need to think about is our zoning in the city. So to make a fully self-contained 15-minute kind of walkable city
mhm,
happen, we have to rethink how we structure our neighborhoods. So since the 50s and 60s, a lot of US zoning is just for single use neighborhoods. Like all the single family homes are here, all the apartments are here, all of the shops are here, and nothing's intermingled. And if you look at older neighborhoods, like I used to live in a country town, like in rural Pennsylvania, way up there, that still had all of its pre-industrial, buildings on Main Street, where you would have shops, you would have apartments, you would have apartments above shops, and that was just the norm, right? So we need to think about how we can push to have our zoning amended to allow for higher buildings, to allow for denser construction, to allow for mixed use neighborhoods. And, when you build your neighborhoods for people to live in, when you give people places to hang out, you give people places to go to shops, they're going to go there and it's going to make life better for everybody. When you build a city around a car, you're just sacrificing half of your land to essentially just have people pass through, So again, I think this is just a really exciting time to be in LA compared to any other city going on. If you're into mobility, into transit, and I think it's only going to get better moving forward. That said, we also have to do the work to make these things happen. So if you're interested in biking, if you're interested in walking, look for groups that are advocating for these sorts of things. Streets for All is a fantastic organization. They really made a push to get HLA passed. They do volunteer meetups, and they're a good place to look out for. If here on the West Side, there's an organizer on Instagram. Her handle is Mobility for Who, and she organizes community bike rides that will go around the bike lanes in Santa Monica, but also talk about what measures are coming up on city council meetings that you could go to make a public comment on. And, if we, the concerned citizens who are into this stuff, don't show up and don't get active, the people who don't want transit or who want things to stay the way they are, they get heard because they show up, So we have to put in a little bit of work too to, make our city better.
And I'm curious, how do you think we can integrate the advancement of public transportation with creating awareness of the benefits it has for the environment? Like, how do we put those two messages together to encourage people to choose public transportation over a private car?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a succinct answer for it, but what I've found from personal experience, and I'm the kind of person that is a lead by example kind of person. I don't think I've ever been particularly persuasive in my arguments, but I certainly have a lot of fun doing what I do, and I hope that's an inspiration to people. But I think a great way to get people to see the relationship between transit and the environment is to just try taking it. I regularly take when I'm doing work in San Diego, I'll take the Surfliner from LA to San Diego, and most of that goes right along, a lot of it goes right along the coast. So, you just get to see so much of natural beauty around you as you're going. Where when I drive, I'm in my car looking at a bunch of other cars, cursing everyone else who is there and the malevolent gods who put me in this situation. So you can also see too with the Surfliner train, the coast has been eroding on the section of that track in Orange County, and in the winter, when it's storm season out here, there's landslides. The tracks have to be closed. That measure of the rail needs to be storm-proofed again and again and again every year. And that's just a huge example of, oh, hey, we did this, Another thing too is when you start walking and you start taking bikes or PVs, when you get around the city without a car, you get to see it a lot more. You get to see the mountains, you get to see the trees in your neighborhoods, you get to see, animals you would never expect to see otherwise. And I think by just experiencing that firsthand, that can really make you care about it. Whereas if you're locked up and isolated in your car, you're insulated from the natural world that's around you. And, I think we like to think of cities as separate from nature. But in reality, nature is all around us. Nature is everywhere. We are a part of it. And the human urban environment is just another environment that is embedded in nature, Yeah. I started planting wildflowers on my porch, on my balcony in the middle of the city that's in a jungle of pavement, and I get hummingbirds every day now. So yeah, it's foolish to think that environmentalism and transit aren't related. All of these issues are so deeply, 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 entwined, even if it's not apparent at a quick glance.
Can you think of some examples that where you find intersection with public transport that are also social issues and environmental ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So one that comes to mind right now is my grandmother back in Pennsylvania. She and yeah, and again, there's not really any usable transit where she lives. She had to get heart surgery a couple of years ago, and her doctor said, "Hey, you can't drive. You're not cleared to drive," after she had her surgeries. And where she was living, she needed to go from the town she was living into Scranton proper to have her heart checked out. She couldn't drive to get there. All of her kids had moved away. The bus didn't go to that town. Or, it only runs, I think, like an hour and a half headways between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., which is just, it's very difficult to get around like that. And my grandmother is a fiercely independent person. She likes to take care of herself. She doesn't want to rely on anybody. And, that has kept her in very good shape and has kept her, sharp into her 80s. And, she was just so upset when that happened, thinking like, oh, like, what do I do now? Like, how am I going to get to my appointments? How am I going to do all this? And if we had in Scranton and in the surrounding towns, if we had a system like the LA Metro, or if we even had buses that covered, like that went a couple extra miles to these smaller outlying towns, my grandma would have been able to maintain her standard of living easily and without having to go through the stress of figuring all of that out. Fortunately, she did bounce back pretty quick and she got cleared to drive again. But, back in the day, Scranton and the surrounding towns also had a huge streetcar system. Like Scranton started electric lights in cities back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And again, in the 60s, we ripped all that out because, oh, you can just like drive or whatever. Well, a lot of people can't. Also, again, going back to my partner who does not have depth perception, who cannot drive safely, not being able to drive limits the kind of job opportunities she can take. As a fitness instructor, and specifically an online fitness instructor, she gets a lot of jobs that are in the San Fernando Valley, which if you try to take a bus there from where we are, it can be an hour and a half to 2 hours, which that's a lot of added time onto your day. So she just can't put out for those jobs that would otherwise, that otherwise might be a good fit, right? And then if you move to a place like San Fernando and you don't drive, then you can't go to the grocery store, you can't have a life. And the third point on this too, when you have, so Santa Monica right now is the only train stop that lets you out at the beach, essentially. So the E line in downtown Santa Monica is, it's like it's like 2 blocks from the pier or something like that. It's a very short walk. When you look at the other coastal ends of the lines, like the C line, that is about 2 miles from the beach in Redondo Beach. And if you don't drive, that limits your access to the beach. That's another reason I like Santa Monica so much, that we have, a train line that you can get to the beach in a reasonable amount of time. Now, there are, like the buses, from wherever you are will take you to the beaches as well. But I think there's a time factor that plays into this. Like during rush hour, during traffic, you can move a lot faster on a train than you can crawling through town. So that I don't want to come across as being anti-bus. So I've recently started exploring the different bus lines in Santa Monica and like the Owl bus lines for going to concerts. I take the 720 regularly now, but that is to say there's an accessibility issue to our beaches and to our natural resources that it can just be harder to get there to a lot of places. And I don't think I don't hear that argument enough in conversations and in public discourse, but I think it's super important. We have some of the most beautiful nature in the country here, like the ocean, the kelp forests. our mountains, and it can be a pain to get to if you don't drive, right? And so we're just blocking off access for huge swaths of our population. And we need to do a little better.
Like we had some public transportation in some places, and then cars arrived and they dominated. So with this domination also comes the use of oil and gas and all these resources that are also damaging our environment. And now in California, there's a goal of going fully electric in all the vehicles, or getting rid of the traditional way of fueling with oil.
Yeah, right. So this, again, definitely is not my area of expertise as, as a transit hobbyist and enthusiast. But I think from a sustainability perspective, there's two major things at play here. One, going electric is in the long run a better option than using combustibles, right? If you look at the emissions or the associated emissions with an electric car, I'll send you links to sources. But initially, the environmental impact on an electric car is very, very high. The longer you drive the electric car, though, the less your impact becomes. And I think it's after maybe like 20 or 30,000 miles, you've broken even, and then like for the total lifetime of your car. And everything after that, you're doing better for the environment after that, right? So there's that. I don't want to demonize cars because they can be a useful tool, but they should not be the only tool in our arsenal, right? The state goal to go 100% electric, hey, that's commendable. Like California leads the nation on environmental, legislation and, sustainability. Everyone else is going to follow suit with us because we are, I think the 5th biggest economy in the world or something like that. However, you also have to consider that if the state is still encouraging everyone to go out and buy a new car. And cars take a lot of resources to build. So I would love to see, in addition to subsidies for going electric, like, hey, when your car dies, great, upgrade to an electric one, right? But I would love to see an equally big push and investment into let's expand all of our public transit systems. Let's electrify our rail systems. Like Caltrain in the Bay Area just released they just started put into service their electric regional trains. And so like that's huge. They switched from diesel to electric for their new models, right? That's huge. Down here, we can look at, there's a bit of a controversy right now with Metro. I don't know if it's a controversy, but it's a discussion. Metrolink, which is Southern California's regional rail. So if you're going between LA, San Bernardino, Orange County, those longer distance trips, they are right now diesel trains. And for stretches, Metrolink is looking to roll out hydrogen fuel cars, which is it's kind of untested, and we don't know if it's going to work at scale, or what the hidden costs we don't know about are going to be. Whereas you look at electric rail, this is something that has been in use for over 100 years. But that is a long-winded way of saying that we need to make an equally big push away from the commercialism associated with run out and buy an electric car right now. And we need to be thinking, how can I drive less? How can I get around without my car? Have, the least harmful option that makes sense for you, for your budget, because cars are incredibly expensive, so do the least harmful option, and also think about shifting the system, change the paradigm. You can go to a lot of places and get around. You can get a lot farther than you would think without ever having to, turn on your car. And I would love to see a larger push for that in the public discourse.
That is a great way of approaching things, and it also forces us to be forces us and invites us to be more creative. I have been a witness of how you apply what you are saying in your everyday life, taking public transportation and then using your one wheeler to get to your final destination.
Hmm.
So yes, like finding strategies, not demonizing the car. I like that because at the end, it's a resource. It's a tool
Yep.
that is sometimes necessary, and it's good that they exist.
Yeah. Oh, Nora, what you just said brings to mind something that I think is the like unsung, I don't know, hero of the LA public transportation system. If you look at any of the individual pieces, the trains are most useful when you live near them, for sure, right?
Mhm.
The buses have wide coverage, can sometimes take you a while to get places, right?
Mhm.
But I've found that if you look at LA's transportation system as a multimodal system,
Mhm.
it like gets so much more useful.
Yes.
Like for me with my one wheel, I'll throw that in my backpack. Maybe I'll take a train up to North Hollywood. And if I'm going to go to a coffee shop or hang out with friends or something, my first mile, last mile, I'll
Mhm.
just take the one wheel. I'll just take my bike. Or if I'll do, sometimes like a train and then a bus trip, right? But if you start looking at ways you can incorporate, biking, PEVs, whatever you have, the system becomes incredibly useful, like very, very fast. And granted, there's a lot of like ableism attached to that, right? Like I'm a pretty fit person, and it's not a problem for me to bike a couple of miles or whatever. So I recognize that that doesn't apply to all people. But if you are able to like take a bus and a bike or take a train and a bike, it is so 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 fun and so much faster than sometimes like train then bus. So train then bike can be faster, and but your options are much larger when you start looking at multimodal frames of transit. And LA system is like quite good for that, and it's only going to get better. So Nora, I have a question for you. You've lived in a bunch of different states, you've lived in a bunch of different cities, you've lived in Mexico. What are some things that you see abroad, like outside of the states, that could be useful for us to like because Americans don't like to think, oh, we're the best, but there's a lot of things that we are not the best at. And so what are some insights that you have from like just being abroad and being other places that we can apply here?
In Mexico City, we unfortunately have the issue of having high levels of pollution that are even dangerous for our health. And there is a restriction that is part of our lives. And sometimes we have like double the restriction. That means that certain vehicles cannot be on the roads on
Mm.
1 day per week.
Oh,
And
cool.
when it gets really bad, the levels of pollution are really bad. They say like, okay, now twice the number of vehicles are not allowed to be on the road, and this of course forces people to use public transportation because like there's no other way. Although I have known people that decide to buy two cars with different information like in their plates, so that if
Hmm.
some numbers are not allowed, some plate numbers are not allowed to be on the road, the other one can. So it's very tricky, and of course this requires intervention from the state in your directly in your movement. That unfortunately in Mexico is a strategy that works
Hmm.
because the level of pollution, air pollution, are reduced. So I don't know if that is the best approach, but it's an idea. Here in LA, I think that most of the time we have good air quality, but it's not the same scenarios on other cities. For example, I was in Bakersfield not long ago, but I was actually looking to to purchase a house over there,
Yeah.
and I saw that the prices were really affordable, and I wonder why is that? So Bakersfield is one of the most polluted cities in the States.
Ooh.
And yes, I did see that it is linked to certain lung diseases. I really like the example of Barcelona, where I lived for some time. The city is built having the pedestrian and people that use
Hmm.
bicycles in mind. So a lot of European cities are very bicycle friendly or bicycle oriented. Now we have the example of Amsterdam that when there is a lot of traffic, it's because everybody's using their bikes. But to be honest, in Barcelona, I was able to commute walking, and sometimes I was even walking for around 45 minutes to get to my destination, even though public transportation is really affordable. I think it was like an euro or something to take the metro, but it was just pleasant to walk. It was safe, the weather was great, and everybody uses bicycles. So it's besides using a car is really expensive. Using a taxi, taking a taxi is really pricey. Building around the pedestrian, and well, we were talking about it with the 15-minute cities. I think those are good strategies. I don't know. Mexico City is a hard example because yes, I was mentioning the hoy no circula, that it's like you do not on the road today, something like that. But also it's a very dense and populated city. The subway and the buses are frequently crowded, which I think reduces, in general, your quality of life and the quality of the experience that people have in public transportation. That it can be enjoyable, as you mentioned, like looking at nature and
Yeah.
so it turns out into tiring, sweaty
I know it's such a
experience.
yeah, it's such a like a double-edged sword, right? Because when you have a transit system that isn't busy enough, then it can feel, kind of dangerous, especially, and I say this too as like, me being a pretty burly guy, that like I've never been afraid on transit. That like, I've seen stuff, sure, but a safe transit system is a busy and used transit system, right? When people are taking it to get where they go. But then you also get situations like, I don't know, my friends and I went to a concert in New York, and they were from rural PA. And like, great, we're taking the trains, and we got into a subway in downtown Manhattan, and I had to just like push them into the car because people were packed in, so tightly, and I could see that maybe not being enjoyable for a lot of folks. But yeah, I don't know, but I guess that just makes a really good case for give us more service, right?
It benefits us all. Like there's not a point against public transportation that I
Yeah.
think of when it's done the right way.
Yeah, a lot of I talked to my grandfather back in PA about this a lot, and one thing that comes up for me a lot, studying sustainability, when I make arguments to my grandfather, who he and I don't align on anything politically at all, but we have a wonderful relationship. But I tell him all the time, like, well, grandfather, what we're trying to do with sustainability more often than not is to just bring back things that were normal when you were a kid. Like look at composting your vegetables, like people have been doing that since the dawn of time. And it
Yes.
turns out having a porch composter is one of the best things you can do with your food waste, or like streetcars or, rail transit. It works. It's highly effective. And, it was widespread once, So I think, one of the awesome things about sustainability is being able to, take a look back in time, see what works, and, to bring back that kind of stuff. And two, unlike a lot of, and I guess this is one thing too that comes up a lot. Thinking when I'm thinking about projects like the proposal to do a monorail for the Sepulveda line and the proposal to do a gondola to Dodger Stadium, that a lot of people have a tendency to get wrapped up and excited by far-flung technical solutions or like high-tech solutions like the Tesla tunnels in Vegas that are barely used. Because we think that, or there's a human tendency to think that we're going to invent our way out of problems of overconsumption, when in reality we already have the solutions that we're looking for, that we just de-invested in. Like composting has existed as long as there's been agriculture and people consuming things. As long as there have been things to decay, composting has been a thing, right? Look at any forest. Yeah, so I think like we have to be smart about how we develop our systems, how we develop systems that people want to use, that go where they're going to go. And most of these things already exist. We just gotta, make the case for it. We have to get involved, to get invested, and show up, right?
Yes. Going back to the origin, like all the time, like the beginning of things is how we can recover our ecosystem,
Yeah.
our peace of mind,
Yeah.
and peace on our spirit. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation, Kyle. Thank you for joining us. It was like really such a pleasure to talk to you and hear about public transportation, about studying the case of LA, and seeing also how we can encourage the public and ourselves to be more mindful about our use of the car and the alternatives that we have. To wrap up this episode, we would like to give our guests 60 seconds to just pitch or share anything you are working on, what you're excited about, or anything you would like to share. The floor is yours.
Okay, 60 seconds. Let's see if I can do this fast. I am going to be launching a car-free LA podcast with Eric Brightwell. It might be out by the time this podcast airs. We're calling that Nobody Drives in LA. If you're interested in transit news around LA specifically, look up Streets for All. They're amazing. If you're on the west side, Mobility for Who. She organizes rides, posts about Santa Monica council meetings. Follow her account. They're amazing. If you're looking to do volunteer stuff, I love Surfrider LA. Heal the Bay is amazing. If you're more inland, Tree People are great. Also, the Theodore Payne Foundation, if you're interested in wildflowers. And a plug also, if you're interested in sustainability, for Santa Monica College's sustainability program. There's a bunch of non-credit and for-credit class options that are, I think, just so practical, useful, and inspiring. And also, if you're interested in the history of LA, SMC has an urban studies class that is specifically about the history of Los Angeles, which I took, I think, last winter, and it was like super, super interesting. Community college, volunteer with nonprofits. Nobody Drives in LA should be coming out soon. And also, I do trash photos. So my trash photos are on display at Surfrider LA's lab in Santa Monica right now. If you happen to volunteer doing water sampling, you can see my photos of trash there. Yeah, that's it. Oh, my Instagram, where if you're not at this very specific lab in Santa Monica, is Kyle Rebar.
Do you have a LinkedIn page?
I do have a LinkedIn. I think it's Kyle Rebar or something like that. I think sometimes informal to the point of to my own detriment, but I'm learning.
Okay, we'll follow you there as well.
Party.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nora.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us today, and our listeners. Thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Talk About Climate. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and rate us 5 stars on your podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk About Climate Pod and Twitter at Talk Climate Pod. And check out our website at changethechamber.org. You can find all the links in the description. This was Let's Talk About Climate. Thanks for joining us.